I studied composition with Herbert. I thank you for that, Herbert. It gives me great pleasure. Herbert Brun.
I maintain that it takes no violence whatsoever to change our society to desirable one. That's a statement. I can't prove it. I wish I could. I would immediately do so. When I put those two over one another, then I have the same population superimposed upon itself, which is just English. And by shifting it a tiny bit, you see it adopt certain structures, centers, and things like that. And when I move it just a very little bit, the centers elsewhere. Can you see that? It's this tenderness, it's a fingertip, it's the lights of movement. We are in a different hierarchy. So that is what is considered the most difficult thing in the world. While programmers can, computers cannot cheat. Sometimes a slight change in language use can bring about a treasure of thoughts that otherwise would never come to speech. Among them may be the sentence we are missing and longing for. I need not be the one who gives it to you. I can give you my longing. Comes the text. The title is A Longing for Links. The word a longing is singular, whereas the word links is plural. A longing for links which favors longing, which favors change over stability, yet insists that these changes not be improvised, but composed in search of changing forms. Okay, I explain. Hierarchies have a bad reputation among thinking humans, because thinking humans were suppressed for too long a time by stable hierarchies. Stable hierarchies inflexibly persuade their members through one-way commands of the desirability of stable hierarchies, in particular the one of which the members are members. When persuasion fails, then stable hierarchies will demonstrate their stability by violence, legally protected crime, and heavily armed hypocrisy. Were it not for thinking humans, the minority, there would not have been a problem. Most people found and find a way to feel free under the benevolent tyranny of one or the other always promising and never delivering stable hierarchy. The problem arose some time ago. The 18th century was its cradle, the 19th century its stern school years. The 20th century set the stage for the problem's adolescence and, of course, a worldwide major attack on thinking humans. And so the problem grew up and now formulates itself for those who ask in precise inference. If I wish to argue with a stable hierarchy of power, it will not hear me. Even listening to my arguments would lose its face. Power cannot argue without losing itself. It will respond to violence, yet I, and that is one problem, refuse to use violence. If I wish to argue with a stable hierarchy of nature, it will not hear me. Even listening to me is unnatural to nature. Nature contains me, the human, as its only critical counter-friend, Yet nature cannot argue, since it can only report. It will respond to reports. Yet I, and that is one more problem, refuse to join the stable hierarchy of things being the way they are. I face reality and facts only if they are seductive. If I wish to argue with the stable hierarchies of beliefs, they will not only deny one another, but also use the logical syllogism which I use to keep thinking flexible, for denouncing my thinking for being logical. Well, it is. And that completes the articulation and formulation of the problem. If we wish to liberate human societies from the violent inflexibility of stable hierarchies of our nature and beliefs, we still must use hierarchies of logics, creativities, imaginations, and visions, yet keep these hierarchies not stable, but floating. With floating hierarchies, we can argue, play, and most likely in time compose human societies where discrimination is a festival while the word against is banned. These pictures that I showed you were floating hierarchies. Since I didn't change anything, there were things that stayed the way they are, and the superimposition only was changing. I changed the overlay. And every time they generated a hierarchy, but never a stable one. Every time it was another one. This is a system of floating hierarchies. That I claim is of great importance.
Weren't there stable hierarchies before the 18th century?
I think so, but I didn't want to bring this in. Yes, I'm quite sure. I think the concept of a stable hierarchy started this religion.
That's what I'm thinking, the hierarchy of belief.
Yes, I say nature, and I mean not me.
Oh, okay.
You can then say, but you are nature too. Yes, but that is nature speaking, you see. We are not mutually exclusive, but when I say nature, then it is that which is used as an argument for being independent of me. My main point is that the stable hierarchy of nature, when I discuss with that, it will not hear me. I come to the second part. There was once a time in which we learned that in school, as one of the anecdotes, where some powerful king or so received bad messages, and what did he do? He punished the messenger. Today we would say communication broke down. I say communication was totally active, only the message was the one that the king wanted to hear. So the king did not punish the messenger for failed communication, but for successful communication of a message that the king didn't want to hear. Our common interest, I assume, that we consider violence not only undesirable, but also unfruitful and of undesirable consequences, also generating an atmosphere, a situation that one wouldn't like to live in, have been so busy with what to do about it that we forgot what the message is. Violence is a message. It doesn't require an institute of higher learning in order to understand that violence happens through the agency of people who find themselves in undesirable situations. So, for some time, one is so busy with curing the consequences of an unwelcome message. And now one wants to go and punish the messengers. We cannot remove violence if we do not understand its message. This is a short sentence. I don't think I can do much about it. You can have more police, more safety, you can have psychological treatment, you can cure the victims, you can heal the damage. You cannot remove violence without removing the message that it gives. And the message that it gives is clearly the one: people who are violent have given up on language or never learned it, and don't want to stay in the situation in which they are. Which situation is this? That would be interesting to find out. What are the particular situations that generate violence? Another sentence, which I'd like you to consider, I tried to come to grips with the word, when is a victim? The answer that I came up with, and please consider it, I consider that person a victim who cannot escape a situation without violence. Doesn't guarantee that the person can escape a situation with violence. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying without violence, this person cannot escape a situation and thus is a victim. This holds together with the previous notion. When I put those two over one another, then I have the same population superimposed upon itself, which is just English. And by shifting it a tiny bit, you see it adopt certain structures, centers, and things like that. When I move it just a very little bit, the centers elsewhere. Can you see that? I maintain that it takes no violence whatsoever to change our society to desirable one. That's a statement. I can't prove it. I wish I could. I would immediately do so. And now comes the third. What might have to be thought about and maybe even generated. I become then more modest. Rightly so. It's the following. If you investigate the sentence structure of our daily discourse, including the media and also our own and domestic talk, including sentences said repeatedly in situations of schools, teaching, and so forth, you will find that every time the term peace is mentioned as a kind of a consequence. We have to do something so that there be peace. So we better do that, otherwise there won't be peace. So peace is described as something which has to be achieved, which you have to find, you have to make. The same thing about hunger. What do you do in order to have hunger? Do you try to achieve hunger, or do you feed? People who are not fed will never be hungry again. In order to have hungry people, you have to give them food. If we could declare peace to be one of the needs, like hunger, which has to be met by food, and thirst, which has to be met by drink, and tiredness, which has to be met by sleep, and then you sleep and sleep, so that you can do something or not become tired again. So this is the definition of needs. Needs are conditions that have to be met so that they can happen again. There are one description of life. One, not the only one, but one description of life is that needs be met so that they happen again. If I could have peace sorted into the table of content entitled needs, it would give us a different English language. We would understand, for instance, that we need peace. And since we need peace, we have to meet it with our conflicts. We have to meet it with our differences. So that there not be war, but that the need for peace be satisfied. So peace is not to ward off conflicts and to avoid all controversy and confrontation. In the contrary, we have to learn a language. English countries English language and other countries other languages. We have to find, or as you can hear from other countries, we have to find a method of languaging which does not assume peace as a reward, but as a condition for conflict. That is, the desirability of conflict has to be celebrated so that it can meet peace. I'm actually finished, but I'm willing to discuss that a bit. If anybody wants to ask a question, I can elaborate. I'm not quite sure. I don't know the congregation here, and I don't want to bore you with unnecessary arguments, but I would like very much to answer questions.
Food satisfies hunger.
Yes.
And sleep satisfies tiredness. What does peace satisfy?
Conflict.
Conflict.
Yes. Hunger is satisfied by food, right? Thirst is satisfied by drink. Peace is satisfied by us being able to have our conflicts. War prevents us having our conflicts. Do you understand that? Do you understand that? War prevents us having our conflicts. War prevents us having our conflicts. I don't want to do without our conflicts. I love them. What I hate is the people who take them and make use of them for profit and power. So conflict, yes. War, no. The concept of entropy is, for me, a deliberately constructed measurement concept, and it has not only invented what that it measures, but also what it measures. I happen to be with you of the opinion that's a very important connection there, and I have invented the retardation of decay. Almost everything decays. Sooner or later, euphemisms for the word decay is, for instance, living. Everybody knows we are dying. But we have found the word living, which sounds so much nicer, right? Denies the message that we ought to have, and we retard this decay as much as we can, and that's the quality of life. When I compose a piece of music, I try to catch certain idea I have, or that has me, maybe one of the two, and would pass and disappear in thin air immediately if I would grasp it and put it into some context in which its repeated appearance will not be just redundancy, but would manifest a little more than its mere existence. This is my connection, but I'm willing to be edge on a little more if I want you to not be satisfied with an answer that you think didn't answer your question.
Could I offer agreement as a form of entropy?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Agreement.
Agreement.
What's that?
Entropy?
Agreement is entropy. Yeah, you're right. It accelerates decay. Yes, that's what marriage is all about.
Agreement doesn't offer anything new. Are
That's
you
right.
suggesting that it's not a process of growth?
It's right.
It's not a process of growth. It's a process of decay.
It's right. 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 Agreement is a non-violent way of making another person superfluous. Agreement is a non-violent way of making another person superfluous. The retardation of decay is intimately concerned with systems and their withering away when you have asked them all the questions. And then we say they lose interest. In fact, we lose interest. Also, when people say about things, that's not interesting, they should say, I'm not interested. But this is the English language that always gives power to someone else. It's treason.
When you speak about agreement, in essence, do you think that agreements, other than being sociologically founded or something like that, do you really think agreements can occur? When in essence the person could be lying?
Under my circumstances, yes. Well, since I declare the truth to be a time word, not a report on facts. Truth is a temporary relationship between what you have said and what you would say. And therefore, what you just asked me, I would say it is possible if you go with me, not without any agreement whatsoever, but suffer with me the fact that truth is nothing else but the relationship between what you did say and what you could say. If this relationship is easy and seems to you agreeable, then you think you're telling the truth. And I'm willing to say, well, he's telling the truth. He's doing the best he can. He's always honest. But it doesn't touch anything like a truth whatsoever. There is no, that's where you are right. It's impossible. We can only speak in fact. But that we really can do a little better. It is difficult, because we don't have the language. I agree with you on this river, that it is necessary for the nourishment of my family, the fish. And you want that river and I want that river. What now? Didn't we agree that this river is absolutely necessary for the maintenance of my family? So I should. Just for the pleasure of pure agreement. Has there ever been a conflict where people did not agree on the bone of contention? On the bone of contention? Agreement is fatal. But I do know that there is another term in mathematics and in logic, and we would have to have a glass of wine together, Klein, sorted out which metaphor we don't need right now.
It seems to me that it's impossible for that to actually be absented.
But who says?
Or in the fact that the person who, if you shot me,
Yes.
that's something that you would change according to my death.
Yes. I wouldn't need to agree with you any longer.
But you would still change according to
Oh
that.
yes, absolutely. No discussion about that. I didn't say that.
So it's not my termination.
No. Yes,
My
it is your
change.
termination. Yes.
But then you're talking about something different.
That would be. But I wouldn't have to reckon with you any longer.
Now the word conspiracy.
Conspire with him?
Well, supposing that you say this with a my family.
Yes.
And he says, I also did this.
Yes.
Let us make a conspiracy such
Yes.
that we both fish from here. We
Yes.
are killing each other.
Immediately. You can have me as a co-conspirator anytime. At that moment, if we could conspire the need for that river, the other nuances that discern us from one another become important, significant, and delightful. Otherwise, we are drowned in the agreement, and it's fatal. I like that.
Agreement is like being nice and they're both very deadly.
Nice used to mean stupid many years ago.
Have you not had the experience that you say something which seems very important to you, someone says, oh yeah, I agree. This is simply dismissing the conversation. It means nothing else. It means, oh, I see. Oh, I know what you mean. These are all dismissals. Bits on a pot.
But it's also a discovery along the sense that I would then go to somebody else.
If you can unearth it after this dialogue, still be my guest. I find the frustration much larger than the chances you take. No, I sympathize with you. I can't have it. I find agreement in all cases that I can quote exactly that. I think they're getting acquainted.
Unless you shoot me.
Then they won't.
Haven't I made myself known to you enough now that you know I wouldn't do that because it's too vulgar for me? My vanity, haven't you noticed my
But you
vanity?
just say you would.
My arrogance, my vanity.
That's just a front.
Of course it's a fraud. What else do you want? You want my bag? No, I think we know what we're talking about by now. I would like to have it continue boiling. It's my preference. Instead of putting a lid on that pot and go away on there. Nice knowing you. Huh? Temporarily, be careful with the word agreement, since it has some connotations that we might wish to do without for a while.
But you would want to wish.
Yes, I think I'm quite socially concerned. Never I'm the only one.
Isn't language like a global conspiracy?
Language?
Yes.
No,
No.
it's not. So,
What I mean is, we talk and we never really know if the other person will agree. So I don't understand why. I guess I'm on a different level with it. I don't understand why it's even an issue.
yeah. The issue is not so much the language, but the belief in it. That we learn to think that when we construct proper sentences, we deliver proper thinking. This is an error. You can read a whole lot of proper sentences saying nothing in particular. And the writer is terribly proud of it.
So who makes the choice when something's proper or
I.
not?
You are the other I. I makes the choice, not makes. Any I, third person singular, makes the choice. You is the reader that has to discern whether you are being dealt a bench of language or a communication of thought or an attempt of seduction, whatever. You have to interpret continuously and with great pleasure, and that's where agreement becomes pale in comparison. If you would read my works, my written book, with the necessary hope and skepticism mixed into one another, I would be so, I would write a second book for you. If you would read a book with a mixture of skepticism and hope, which is necessary in order to interpret somebody else's writing, then I would be delighted. If you would read it only with belief or only with skepticism, then it's not very significant. It doesn't make any difference. Since it is language, it is in a way lost. Lost it is on the communicative level, because you will make it part of your repertory, so I can't tell you anything that you couldn't tell yourself. In order to make that not happen, you have to give my language the chance that it is not yet in your repertory the way I did it. This is a friendly act, takes a little while, and will not last forever. It decays. You will memorize it, know it by heart, quote it to your friends, and then slowly start stinking. But we can prolong that process. Yes?
You said that sleep
Tiredness
tiredness causes your tiredness
is met by...
is met by sleep.
Yes.
Now, what is wouldn't skepticism then be met by agreement?
That would be news.
The idea of you're making two little polarities in a way. Sleep, tired.
No,
Not polarities.
No, no,
not
no, no, no.
polarities.
That is no. Please, don't do that. No, no. You can investigate content, but you cannot investigate my language. Tiredness is a condition which has to be met by sleep.
But what
I
about?
think they are not polarized. They are necessary.
Wouldn't agreement then be a condition which must be met by skepticism?
No,
But you said it was.
I don't think that agreement is a need.
But then how could it exist then at all as a...
I don't see why agreement should happen again when I'm skeptical about it.
But how could you have agreement without... Or how could you have skepticism without having already agreed?
I don't say I cannot have it, only I don't call it a need. So it doesn't belong into my universe of needs.
Oh.
I have a question. In your analogies, you said that sleep,
Tiredness,
tiredness is met by and hunger is met by feeding of that. And those, you have physiological definitions of how those needs are met. How do I then recognize peace if I do have it?
that is a club I would like to open up, to find out. What I say is what has to be. I have not told that I know where or I have it. I want you to join me in wanting it. It has not been accepted in this society and in this language that peace is a need. It has been accepted that peace is a reward for some good behavior. Just the other things. Have you ever found out that you have to do something in order to be happy?
Yes.
Everything is a reward-oriented hierarchy in what we live. We live in a reward-oriented hierarchy. Sometimes it's a sweet situation, sometimes it's a lousy situation, but it is never not a reward-oriented hierarchy. That's why we all are climbers. No matter how modest we are, we always climb because there's some reward.
But
Can you imagine if we were to start with happiness, what we could build?
again, how do we both know? Or is peace an individual kind of concept? Then?
By saying it to one another. Excuse me, this is the answer at the moment. It's all that we say to one another that we have peace. Now we can fall. And say that. With everything, lip, tongue, and teeth. And the body, biological existence. Make it a part, as you just sometimes say, I love you, or I hate you. Why can't you say, it's peace, come, let's have it out.
Then you must define peace, and we've associated in this society peace with agreement. So we need another definition for peace, and how do we then define what
Yes.
peace is?
Okay, that might be so. But it would be wonderful if we could work that out together. And not one here, everywhere. So that it becomes another intellectual exercise of little sports. I would like that to be introduced into all our issues that occupy us in various intensities in various places. They all can stand. This little item has a spice. That they are all our issues on some disagreement, some conflict, some injustice, some bad feelings, some whatever, you know it, I don't have to say. But they all are trying to remove the enemy. They are not trying to invite the enemy to a peace. So that the conflict may happen at last, and not be only a nagging thing like a toothache.
So
Now
we
that,
would know there is peace.
Mhm.
We saw there was fun.
yes, but that is what I mean with the loud speaking.
We well.
Yes, if I could tell you, come, let's have it out, then you would know that
Then we
house
would
is-
know we were in
we were in
peace
peace.
together.
Yes,
Because we can only argue with each other
when
when we are in peace.
That's-
Otherwise, we would have to
that
kill
is
each
what
other.
I want. I've tried very many ideas, and I'm not saying that this is best or last. I want to avoid giving authority to a higher power. That's what I don't want anymore. And I would like to be able to retard the decay of knowing that I'm a human being.
Would you perhaps discuss then the concept of peace in a dialectical
Yes.
relationship? Then?
Yes,
Would you say that peace is the conclusion or the evolution of dialectical relationships?
I would say it is premise. For the time being, I would say it's a premise. If we get a little further and we renovate the language altogether, then we will have to have an investigation between found premises and deliberately stipulated premises. And I would like both to have equal rights. But that we can only have when peace has become a playground. Is it halfway satisfactory how I respond? Yes.
I see commonality.
I know how difficult it is, so please have patience with me too. We will continue to have violence without finding out of what violence is the message. We will not remove it. If we only find out how to protect ourselves against the message we should read, the message will be fired against us day in, day out, continuously forever.